Gabriel had always loved Sandra for as long as he could remember. From their early days in primary school, when she wore thick glasses that constantly slid down her nose, to secondary school, where her oversized uniforms and obsession with books made her an easy target for mockery. She was awkward, quiet, and socially invisible, but to Gabriel, she was special. But there's a big problem. He was Gabriel Okechukwu, the most popular boy in school, the son of a wealthy businessman, and the untouchable heartthrob every girl wanted. He had a reputation to maintain, and dating a nerd like Sandra would ruin it. Yet, he couldn't stay away from her. Their secret romance started in SS1 when they found themselves paired for a science project. They started with late-night calls, stolen moments in empty classrooms, and handwritten notes passed between pages of books. Gabriel found comfort in her intelligence and kindness. But in the eyes of the school, he kept his distance. If anyone noticed how his gaze lingered on her a little too long, he laughed it off because he doesn't want anyone to know that the almighty Gabriel is dating a nobody. But Sandra noticed. She noticed how he walked past her in the corridors as if they were strangers. How he pretends not to know her in the public. How he danced with other girls at school events while she stood in the corner, pretending not to care. She didn't complain after all. It was enough that he chose her in private, but deep down, her heart ached. Just a few months after they started their secret romance, Gabriel started dating Loveth publicly, a beautiful, confident, and the undisputed queen of the school. When Gabriel started dating her, Sandra's heart cracked. When Gabriel told her that it didn't change anything between them, she foolishly believed him. But how long could she be his secret before she lost herself completely? Sandra never asked for much. She never begged for flowers, grand gestures, or public declarations. All she wanted was to feel seen, to let everyone know about their relationship. But Gabriel made her invisible. She felt it the most in the mornings, when he strolled into the school with Loveth clinging to his arm, their laughter echoing through the hallways. She watched as girls gushed over him, as boys envied him, as teachers admired him. And yet, if their eyes accidentally met, he would glance away, pretending she was just another face in the crowd. It hurt. But the worst part is the way he makes it up to her. When the school day ended, Gabriel would find her, always in some hidden places, away from judging eyes. Sometimes it was the back of the library, sometimes the deserted physics lab, sometimes behind the school hostel, and in those stolen moments, he will become soft and tender like the boy she had fallen in love with. I swear, it's just for the public. Loveth doesn't mean anything to me, he whispered one evening, his hands cradling her face. You're the one I want, Sandra. You always have been, and she believed him. Because in the secret, Gabriel was everything she dreamed of. He listened when she spoke, laughed at her dry jokes, and kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. But as soon as they stepped outside, it all disappeared. Sandra tried to be okay with it. She told herself that their love was real, even if it lived in the shadows. But every time she watched Gabriel slip his hand around Loveth's waist, every time she saw his lips brush against another girl's cheek, she felt something inside her crack. How much longer could she pretend? One afternoon, Sandra sat at the far end of the cafeteria, her tray untouched. The noise around her felt distant, like she was watching life happen from the other side of a glass wall. Across the room, Gabriel sat with Loveth, laughing as she fed him a spoonful of ice cream. His arm rested lazily around her shoulder, his fingers tracing circles on her skin. Sandra's stomach twisted. It shouldn't hurt anymore. She had told herself that 1,000 times. But it did. It hurt when Loveth ran her fingers through his hair. It hurt when the entire cafeteria cheered as Gabriel kissed her cheek. It hurt when he acted like Sandra didn't exist. She tore her gaze away, blinking rapidly. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not in front of everyone. You're staring again, a voice broke into her thoughts. Sandra turned to see Vivian, her only real friend, giving her a knowing look. Unlike Sandra, Vivian didn't bother with oversized sweaters or thick-rimmed glasses. She was loud, confident, and unapologetically herself. I wasn't staring, Sandra mumbled, stabbing her fork into her food. Right, Vivian drawled, stealing a meat from Sandra's plate. And I'm the Queen of England, Sandra sighed. I don't get it. He says he loves me, but he parades Loveth around like she's his prized possession? Look, babe, Vivian continued, leaning closer. I get that you love him. But love shouldn't feel like a secret you have to hide. You deserve to be someone's first choice, not some hidden option. Sandra swallowed the lump in her throat. She wanted to argue, to defend Gabriel, to say that he had no choice. That if he could, he would choose her in public. But deep down, she wasn't sure if that was true. And that realization made her chest ache. That evening before the end of the day's activities, Gabriel sent her a text. "Meet me behind the science block after prep. I miss you." Sandra stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the screen. She should ignore it. She should be angry. She should tell him she was tired of being his hidden love. But she wasn't ready to lose him. So, as soon as the last bell rang, she slipped through the corridors, her heart pounding. When she reached the back of the science block, Gabriel was already there, leaning against the wall, his hands buried in his pockets. His uniform was slightly rumpled, his tie loose around his neck. The moment he saw her, he smiled. "Hey, babe." Just like that, her anger faded. "Don't hey babe me," she muttered, crossing her arms. "You ignored me all day." Gabriel sighed and pulled her close, resting his chin on her hair. "You know it's not that simple." Sandra wanted to push him away. Wanted to scream that love wasn't supposed to be this complicated. But instead, she melted into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. "You're all I think about, Sandra. I need time. People won't understand." She pulled back, looking up at him. "Understand what, Gabriel? That you love a nerd." His jaw tensed, and for a second she saw it, that flicker of shame in his eyes. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Sandra felt something crack inside her. She had spent so long believing that Gabriel was protecting their love. But what if he was just protecting himself? What if she was the secret he was ashamed of? Gabriel kissed her then, his lips soft and desperate, as if trying to erase the truth she was beginning to realize. And like always, she let him. Because loving him in secret was better than not having him at all. After all the secret romance, Sandra walked to her hostel alone, laying in bed staring at the ceiling. Vivian's words echoed in her mind. "You deserve to be someone's first choice." But what if she wasn't? What if Gabriel never saw her that way? She rolled over and grabbed her phone, staring at their chat. She wanted to text him, ask if he ever planned to stop hiding her. But the fear of his answer kept her fingers frozen. Memories of how Gabriel walked past her like she didn't exist in the afternoon flooded her mind. Sandra lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy with unspoken thoughts. The silence of the small hostel room was deafening, filled with the echoes of Gabriel's laughter with Loveth, the way he had ignored her in the hallways, and the way he only seemed to remember her when no one was watching. She clutched her phone again, staring at their last message. "Meet me behind the science block. I miss you." It was always like this, hiding, waiting, accepting the little he offered like it was enough. But was it? She didn't know how much longer she could keep pretending. The next morning, Sandra walked into the schoolyard with Vivian, her face buried in a novel as they made their way to the classroom. But the moment they stepped in, a wave of whispers and laughter swept through the students. "Did you see the post?" someone murmured. "Gabriel and Loveth are so cute together." Another girl gushed. Sandra's stomach twisted. She followed Vivian's gaze to the bulletin board where a large printed picture was pinned. It was a screenshot from social media, Gabriel and Loveth, wrapped in each other's arms, a caption underneath that read, "The hottest couple in school." Sandra's chest tightened as she stared at the photo. Gabriel's arm was around Loveth's waist, their faces close, his smile genuine, nothing like the hurried, hidden smiles he gave Sandra in private. Vivian nudged her gently. "Sandra?" Sandra forced a laugh, shoving her feelings down. "It's fine. I knew about them already." Vivian gave her a look. "Did you? Because you don't look fine." But Sandra just shook her head and walked to her seat, trying to ignore the pain clawing at her chest. Days passed, and Sandra found herself growing colder, distant. She still met Gabriel in secret, but something inside her had shifted. One evening, as they sat in their usual hidden spot, Gabriel reached for her hand. "You're acting differently lately." Sandra stared at their entwined fingers, her voice barely above a whisper. "Gabriel, do you love me?" He hesitated. It was brief, but she caught it. "You know I do," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then why am I your secret? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Sandra, it's complicated. She pulled her hand away. No, it's not. It's simple. If you love me, you wouldn't be ashamed of me not to talk of dating another girl. Why must you date her? Gabriel stiffened, but before he could respond, Sandra stood up. For the first time, she didn't wait for his excuses. She just walked away. And it felt like breathing for the first time because she slept better that night compared to every other nights. The next morning, the school was buzzing with excitement. A new student had arrived, someone rich, powerful, and already making waves. Sandra barely paid attention until Vivian grabbed her arm at lunch. You have to see this. Sandra followed her outside, where a crowd had gathered. A sleek black car was parked in front of the school, and from it stepped a boy, tall, confident, and effortlessly handsome. His uniform was crisp, his wristwatch gleamed in the sunlight, and when he removed his sunglasses, his sharp eyes scanned the crowd with quiet authority. That's Philip Adenuga, someone whispered. His dad is a billionaire. Philip's gaze swept through the crowd until, for a fleeting moment, it landed on Sandra. And he smiled. Sandra felt a shiver run down her spine. She had no idea her life was about to change. For the first time in years, someone other than Gabriel noticed Sandra. Philip didn't just glance at her, he saw her. And unlike Gabriel, he didn't look away. In class, he was given a seat next to hers, and during lunch, he found reasons to talk to her. He asked about her favorite books, her hobbies, her dreams. And he listened. Sandra wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from someone like Philip. But as the days passed, she found herself smiling more, laughing without restraint, and feeling worthy, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Gabriel noticed the change. He saw the way Sandra laughed with Philip, the way she no longer looked at Gabriel like he was her world. It made him uncomfortable. One afternoon, he found her alone by the library. Hey baby, he said, stepping closer. Sandra barely looked up. Hey, he frowned. You've been distant. I've been busy, she said simply. Gabriel clenched his jaw. He didn't like this. He didn't like that she wasn't hanging onto his every word anymore. He reached for her hand, but this time she pulled away. I have to go, she said. And just like that, she left. For the first time, Gabriel felt what Sandra had felt for years. Sandra barely recognized herself anymore. She no longer walked with her head down, shrinking into the background. She no longer waited for Gabriel to acknowledge her. Instead, she focused on herself, on the things that made her happy. Philip had a way of making her feel important, not just in private but in public. He introduced her to new books, new music, new ideas. He challenged her to step out of her comfort zone. And most importantly, he never treated her like a secret. One afternoon, Philip surprised her by waiting outside their classroom. Do you want to walk with me? He asked, his smile warm. Sandra hesitated. The entire school was watching. If she stepped out with him, there would be no going back. Then she thought about Gabriel, about the way he always kept her hidden. So she lifted her chin, nodded, and walked beside Philip. And just like that, Sandra became someone worth noticing. Gabriel watched them from across the hall, his fists clenching involuntarily. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Sandra was supposed to always be there, waiting in the background for him. She wasn't supposed to be laughing with another guy, wasn't supposed to look so radiant. For the first time, Gabriel felt powerless. And he hated it. That evening, he sent Sandra a text, "Can we talk?" And for the first time, she didn't reply. The next day, Philip invited Sandra to lunch with his friends. She hesitated at first, but when she entered the cafeteria, heads turned. Who's that? Someone whispered. Wait. Is that Sandra? No more weird glasses. Even Loveth, who had always dismissed Sandra as irrelevant, narrowed her eyes. Gabriel watched in stunned silence as Sandra took a seat beside Philip, laughing at something he said. She looked different. Her posture was straighter. Her eyes were brighter and beautiful without glasses. She was wearing her natural beauty with confidence. And Gabriel felt sick with regret. Later that afternoon, Gabriel finally cornered Sandra outside the library. What's going on with you? He demanded. Sandra crossed her arms. What do you mean? This thing with Philip. You're suddenly acting like Like what, Gabriel? She interrupted, her voice steady. Like someone who knows her worth. Gabriel swallowed. You're mine, Sandra. Sandra let out a short laugh. No, Gabriel. I was yours in secret. But I refuse to be hidden anymore. It is over between us. Go and enjoy loveth. And with that, she walked away, leaving Gabriel standing there, hollow with regret. For the first time in her life, Sandra felt free. She no longer lingered in dark corners, waiting for stolen moments with Gabriel. She walked through the school halls with confidence, her shoulders squared, her head held high. Philip made her feel seen, not just when they were alone, but in front of the whole world. One afternoon, as they sat under the mango tree near the football field, Philip turned to her. Have you ever thought about doing something different with your style? Sandra frowned. What do you mean? I mean, you hide behind baggy clothes and big glasses. I think it's time you let people see the real you. Sandra hesitated. She had spent years blending into the background, afraid of attention. But looking at Philip, she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. That weekend, she stood in front of her mirror and made a decision. She tore her oversized sweaters, replacing them with fitted blouses and skirts that suited her figure. She let go of the thick-rimmed glasses, choosing contact lenses instead. She let her regular hairstyle breathe, styling her hair in a way that framed her face beautifully. When she walked into school on Monday, silence followed her. Whispers filled the hallways. Is that Sandra? Even Loveth did a double take. But it was Gabriel's reaction that mattered most. He stood frozen at his locker, his eyes widening as he took her in. For the first time, he saw her, not the quiet nerd he had hidden in the shadows, but the woman she had become. And regret hit him like a punch to the gut. Gabriel couldn't focus all day. He had spent years convincing himself that keeping Sandra a secret was for the best. But seeing her now, standing tall, laughing openly, walking beside Philip, he realized something painful. He had never truly appreciated her. Now it was too late. Or was it? That evening, he waited outside the class. Can we talk? He asked, his voice softer than usual. Sandra glanced at him, then at Philip, who stood beside her. She didn't hesitate. No, Gabriel. We have nothing to talk about. Then she walked away, leaving him standing there, drowning in his own regret. Gabriel wasn't used to rejection. For years, he had been the guy everyone wanted, the one with status, the one who called the shots. But now, for the first time, he felt powerless. He started losing focus in class. He ignored Loveth's texts. He stopped laughing with his friends. One day, Loveth cornered him. What's your problem? You've been acting weird. Gabriel ran a hand through his hair. Nothing. But Loveth wasn't stupid. She followed his gaze and scoffed. Oh, I see. It's about her, isn't it? Gabriel stayed silent. Loveth laughed bitterly. I knew you never really loved me. You just used me to boost your reputation. She shook her head and walked away. For the first time, Gabriel felt like he had lost everything. Desperate, Gabriel decided to do what he should have done long ago. He walked into the cafeteria, right in front of the entire school, and made his way to Sandra's table. Philip sat beside her, but Gabriel didn't care. All eyes were on him. Sandra, I messed up, he said, his voice raw. I should never have hidden you. I was a coward, and I regret everything. A silence fell over the room. Sandra stared at him, her expression unreadable. Give me another chance, Gabriel pleaded. Let me make things right. For a moment, there was silence. Then Sandra took a deep breath. Gabriel. She looked at Philip, then back at Gabriel. I spent years waiting for you to love me in public. But you only want me now because someone else does. Gabriel flinched. Sandra shook her head. I deserve better. Then she took Philip's hand, stood up, and walked away. Gabriel sat there, stunned, as the realization sank in. He had lost her. For good. Sandra had never felt this happy before. With Philip, everything was different. He didn't hesitate to hold her hand in public, didn't shy away from calling her beautiful, and didn't treat her like a second option. For the first time in her life, she knew what it felt like to be truly loved. One evening, as they walked through the school garden, Philip turned to her. Sandra, have you ever thought about us? You know, being something more? Her heart skipped a beat. You mean, like a real couple? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Philip smiled. Yes. I don't want to just be the guy who makes you smile. I want to be the guy who makes you happy, always. Tears pricked Sandra's eyes. Without hesitation, she nodded. Yes, Philip. I will love that. And just like that, Sandra and Philip became the couple everyone admired. Gabriel, on the other hand, was losing his mind. It had been easy to ignore Sandra when she was his secret. But now, seeing her in Philip's arms, laughing freely, being adored by the entire school, he couldn't take it. One afternoon, he stormed into the cafeteria, straight to their table. Sandra, we need to talk. Philip narrowed his eyes and smiled. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of me. Gabriel ignored him. His eyes locked onto Sandra, desperate. Please, just give me 5 minutes. Sandra sighed and stood up, stepping away with him after Philip signaled her to go ahead. What do you want, Gabriel? His voice wavered. I made a mistake. I should have chosen you from the start. I still love you, Sandra. Her chest tightened, but not from longing, from closure. Gabriel, for years, I waited for you to be proud of me. And you weren't. She took a deep breath. But Philip saw me. He loved me the way I deserved. I'm not going back. Gabriel's face fell. Please, Sandra. I'll do anything. She smiled sadly. I already made my choice. And as she walked back to Philip, hand in hand, Gabriel knew he had lost her forever. Sandra and Philip became the talk of the school. Not for drama, not for controversy, but for how effortlessly they fit together. They walked through the hallways side by side, sharing laughter and whispered conversations. Unlike the shallow relationships built on status, theirs was built on something real, respect, admiration, and a deep understanding of each other. Philip never hesitated to show his love for Sandra, whether by carrying her books, waiting outside her class, or simply looking at her like she was the most important person in the world. And Sandra, she blossomed. She no longer hid behind thick glasses and oversized clothes. She spoke with confidence, took up leadership roles, and let the world see how brilliant she truly was. For the first time, she wasn't just that nerdy girl. She was Sandra, the girl who transformed, the girl who was loved, the girl who inspired others to embrace their worth. While people admired her new beauty and confidence, Sandra made sure they knew she was more than just her looks. She poured herself into her studies, determined to prove that she wasn't just a pretty face attached to a popular boyfriend. With her studies, her grades skyrocketed. She topped every test, participated in debates, and even joined the school's science competition. With Philip by her side, cheering her on, she discovered a version of herself she never knew existed. People respected her now, not because of who she was dating, but because of who she had become. Philip wasn't just Sandra's boyfriend, he was her biggest supporter. When she stayed up late studying, he brought her snacks. When she doubted herself before an exam, he reminded her of how smart she was. When she won an academic award, he was the loudest one clapping. I told you, you're incredible, he whispered as he hugged her after one of her biggest wins. Sandra realized then, this was what real love felt like. No secrets, no shame, just two people pushing each other to be the best versions of themselves. While Sandra succeeded, Gabriel crumbled. He watched from a distance as the girl he had once kept in the shadows became the most admired student in school. She had everything now: beauty, intelligence, confidence, and Philip. Gabriel was supposed to be the one standing by her side, the one who helped her grow. But instead, he had pushed her away, and Philip had picked up the pieces. For the first time in his life, Gabriel understood what true regret felt like. And the worst part? There was nothing he could do to change it. Graduation day arrived, marking the end of an unforgettable chapter. As Sandra stood on stage, receiving the award for academic excellence, the entire hall erupted in applause. Philip was in the crowd, cheering the loudest, his eyes filled with pride. Gabriel, sitting alone at the back, felt the full weight of his mistakes. After the ceremony, he finally approached Sandra. Sandra, I just want to say, I'm sorry. And I'm happy for you. Sandra looked at him, not with anger, not with longing, but with peace. Thank you, Gabriel. I hope you find someone who makes you happy too. Then she turned to Philip, taking his hand as they walked away together. Two people who had found true love, built on honesty, growth, and mutual respect. Gabriel watched them disappear, knowing he had lost the best thing that had ever happened to him. And for the rest of his life, Gabriel would remember this chapter, the day he lost the only girl who ever truly loved him. This is the end. Remember to like, drop a sweet comment and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.